Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and welcome. It's my first opportunity for PolarX to present here, although we've been here coming for several years now. This is my favourite conference on the calendar because it's the one where you really get to talk to the retail shareholder, and you guys are the ones that drive the share price. So I'll present to you now, but come to the booth if you've got any questions. I'll probably skip over a few things. I'm going to try and keep the message as simple and clear as possible. But since we last were here, quite a bit's gone on. The most significant thing that you're probably aware of that happened with PolarX in December, Northern Star came in for 10% of our registry, and we went on quite a run from about 0.8 of a cent to 3.3 cent peak on the back of that. So just a quick outline, we're focused on Alaska and Nevada in the US. The Alaskan range, we've been working on that since about 2017-18, so quite a few people here will be familiar with what we're doing there. Unfortunately, the short seasonality really does work against you, so you need to have more than one string in your bow there. And I scouted around in North America for quite some time and came across the Humboldt Range project in Nevada, and we picked that up about 2 years ago, and we've been toiling away at that since. So I'll give you an update what's happened there. We've had 2 drilling programs, and I'll paint more of a regional context as well, because it's quite important to understand what's going on with our focus on the ground there. So we've got strong news flow coming. We have had a little delay with such a long, brutal winter in North America this year. I didn't resume a drilling program after December because it became clear that we really want to get on the ground and do some IP. Being a ground survey, you've got to wait for the snow to melt. We're about to get on the ground now. I was just in Nevada last week. We've got the crew turning up any day now, and we'll start rolling out IP surveys across the 4th of July and Black Canyon projects. I've also been working on the review of Caribou Dome. So in the last 12 months, we did a scoping study on Zackley and Caribou Dome. It's positive results, but we can improve that, and we're working on upgrading the Caribou Dome resource. I'll tie into that as well. Okay, so we haven't really had much change of the personnel on the board, just we jostled a couple of seats in the last 12 months. So I became the managing director. Fraser Tabbitt's now non-executive, and Mark's still there as chairman. We've got very strong shareholder support, as you can see. Rougher Gold, they've been there for a long time, continuing to support us. Northern Star, they just came on the registry. Golden Hill, US Global. All of those guys are very, very keen to continue to support us, and that just makes every capital raising a lot easier when you know you've got probably about a 35% cornerstone before you even turn to the market. Okay, so regionally, Nevada. So we've got Black Canyon, which is right next door to the Florida Canyon gold mine, which is active and it's owned by Argonaut Gold. We've got Rochester to the south, which is owned by Kerr Mining. And an important piece of the puzzle is the emerging story of Spring Valley. So Spring Valley was a Barrick asset until about 2015. The numbers I've given you there are from a 2014 resource, and I don't know what the upgrades have been. It got purchased by Waterton. They're a private equity firm out of Toronto. They also purchased the ground next door that had 1.2 million ounces as well. So in 2015, they kicked off with about 5.5 million ounces in that project. They've been busy. They've been drilling and developing that project the entire time. As I said, I don't know what their current resource size is, but I do know local geologists in Nevada that have been working on it, and all they just tell me is, mate, it's big. Okay, so if I move on to the Black Canyon project, everyone's probably seen these high-grade numbers, and they were very appealing to get onto. You've got a number of veins that have been worked in the past with multiple ounces per tonne, and it's hosted in a rhyolite and andesite formation. Now, in those rhyolite units, you get also some bulk tonnage intercepts. So we've got the situation where if you go for the high-grade veins, you're probably going to find, it's all refractory, you're going to find that you can develop a high-grade concentrate and you can truck it to like Battle Mountain, for example, which is a couple hundred miles away. But if you're looking at the bulk tonnage, you're going to need a facility nearby to process that sort of thing. So my strategy until recently has really been on those high-grade veins. All I can say is I'm aligned with my major shareholders' interests, and my mission on the ground now is really to dial in on these high-grade zones. So if you look at the soil map that I've got there, so there was no, we did this in the last 2 years, there was no systematic exploration done on this until we turned up. We've got like a 3 kilometre by 2 kilometre anomaly. I've drilled at the Star Canyon project, which is only a small part of that anomaly. We've hit high grades, like 9.1 metres at 124 grams, which is pretty impressive, and 48 grams silver. The trick here is to dial in where we're really seeing the bulk intercepts at the higher grades. So this belt, I forgot to mention, is most of the grades, average grades 0.4 to 0.6. So if you have a look at Nevada and their annual gold production of like 3.3 million ounces, most of that comes out of deposits that are less than 1 gram. And the reason is they do bulk well. And most of that is refractory. They've already got 4 roasters in the state. So it's not like you're finding refractory ore at the back of Burke. You've got infrastructure in place. So what we're trying to do is exploit the close association between the sulfides and the gold. And the technique that you need for that is called induced polarization. So you've got to put a current through the ground, and where you see both coincident chargeability anomaly and resistive anomaly because of the silica, that's going to be your high-grade targets. So we're rolling out that survey program starting later this week. I'll update the market when the crew is on the ground, and that should go for about 8 weeks. So as I mentioned, we've hit both high-grade and low-grade bulk intercepts, but if you look at things like, sorry, I haven't got my glasses on, I need to look at this. Looking at like 42 metres at 0.32 grams, and including 25.9 metres at 0.48. Now that's not going to rock anyone's boat in Western Australia, but that's the kind of stuff that you need as bulk tonnage, the bulk tonnage story here. And if you can get that up and running, you're going to find a very worthy asset in this area that the likes of some of my shareholders will be very interested in. Okay, so I've already laboured this point. I'll just point out to you. So, for example, the Golden Staircase, we had a crew hang off that mountain with ropes and saw cut 70-metre long trench. In there, we've got average grade of 1.1 grams. That's in the rhyolite unit. That unit dips gently underneath the mountain range. It has repeated sequences. That's the kind of thing I'm trying to dial in with the IP survey. So you can see that this mountain itself is well mineralised, and it's just trying to get to the point where we can see we've got most likely economic grades, large enough tonnages. Okay, likewise with the 4th of July, we did drill there last year. That's the project in the south. We had some disappointing results, and there was nothing of significance to inform the market. But at that time, the targets were quite near surface, and they did coincide too much with old artisanal workings. Now that I know there's interest in bulk tonnage, I can go deeper. I've also got more information on a limestone sequence that lies just above this Rochester rhyolite. On the existing maps, it's actually quite a steep contact, and but when you're out in the field and the holes we've been drilling, we found out it's actually fairly flat. So the IP survey will give me far more information than I can get from anything at the surface. And it's likely that I'm going to find that there's targets underneath that as well. So 4th of July is still very active for those that have been following our story. Okay, now on to Alaska. we're on the Alaskan Range along the Denali Highway. We're about a 90-minute drive from Pogo. Now, Northern Star is obviously the owner of Pogo and very interested in what we're doing in Alaska. So you can see where Caribou Dome is on the left-hand side and exactly on the right-hand side. So we did a scoping study on these two, and I can tell you as a word of advice, it's not a good year to do a scoping study when your inflation's just climbing and climbing and climbing. We had to revise the freight cost 6 times during that scoping study. So it was a positive scoping study, really around current prices for copper. Gold has obviously gone on a bigger run since then. Despite taking a $50 million loss in the freight prices increases, we had a $70 million NPV for basically a $100 million capex. Doesn't sound that exciting, however, when you go and have a closer look at Caribou Dome. Now, my background, I have a PhD in structural geology, and I've never been very pleased with the existing Caribou Dome resource that came along before my company Vista did the merger with Coventry. The reason is this is refolded faults, and it was never put together as refolded faults. You've got to get out there, map the surface, you've got to understand the geometry. Now, the new wireframing that's been done on Caribou Dome, it has the continuity right. If you look closely at that resource, you'll see jewel traces outside that resource. Those jewel traces should be in the resource. There is continuity there, and I can tell you now there's high grades in those. So we'll be informing the market on the results of the resource study probably start of June, I'd say. Now, I'm expecting a very significant change in the resource, and I'm also expecting that will have a significant impact on the scoping study. So we will review the scoping study as well. Next step in Alaska is to obviously find quick tons, because the good thing about doing a scoping study is it narrows your exploration focus. What we're trying to do is create value as quickly as possible for shareholders, and I want to get to a position where I'm further down the production path. Now, exactly in the past, we've been focusing on the copper and gold along the surface. But doing that joint study, you can see that you need to do a sulfide plant, and we haven't taken that resource down below 200 metres vertical depth. So it's not a difficult drilling program on basically a very steep ore body to come in underneath that and pull that down and add some tonnes to that as well. So that's basically my focus in the next 12 months, is to move Nevada along and Alaska, and with the goal of getting Alaska to the point where it can go into a PFS next year. And on that note, I'll leave it to the next speaker. Thank you.